for your life. Run for your life.
All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Ward Radio live stream. To all of our audiences across all platforms, we're restreaming today, and we've got an interesting to say the least, topic here. I am joined via Zoom by two of my good friends from varying aspects of the political spectrum, shall we say. Jacob Hansen from Thoughtful Faith, as well as Kwaku L., fellow co-host here on what once was Midnight Mormons, now is Ward Radio, and old president of the BYU Democrats here to discuss this topic du jour. I can't believe I actually made this thumbnail, but here it is. Was Christopher Columbus good or bad? It's a simple question here, but a unique one, because members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have a unique relationship with Christopher Columbus, because many people believe that he was indeed enshrined in Scripture in the Book of Mormon and specifically mentioned. Whereas, is that a bunch of hogwash? Was he a baddie? You know, we're here to discuss. So I'm going to let you guys jump right in and just do your thing. Just a couple of parameters here. All right. Just nothing that's going to get me any kind of weird strikes. Okay. And try not to just burn the whole place down. All right. That's the only thing I ask. So what should we do here, guys? Do you want to flip a coin? Do you want to just jump in? What do you want to do?
First of all, I want to make a little preface statement, because you said, Columbus is very important to Latter-day Saints. I want everyone to know, I don't really care. If Columbus was a bad dude, that wouldn't affect my testimony of the Book of Mormon or anything. This has nothing to do with religion for me. It is a historical question about who Christopher Columbus was, what did he do, how should we analyze what he actually did, what the historical record shows that he did or did not do. And so I don't want this debate to be it's in my mind, this isn't a religious debate. It's a debate specifically just about, have we been given a proper understanding of Christopher Columbus as we're taught about him in history, and people may teach that from different perspectives. So that's kind of what I wanted to explore with Kwaku here.
All right, Kwaku, well, you got anything to say before we jump in?
Yeah.
You're smiling like you're about to do something heinous. I'm scared, Kwaku. I'm scared.
No. I'm not going to burn this live stream down. This is not Hispaniola, and I'm not Christopher Columbus. So I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to burn it all down. I hope people who are investigating, the restored gospel don't watch this and think, this is a big hinge point for the majority of members of the church could not care less about anything we're going to talk about. This is a non-issue in church. It's kind of like a niche subject you find on X and random Facebook groups of people debating, was Christopher Columbus really the man spoken of in the Book of Mormon, and was Gordon B. Hinckley right to say that he was? If he was or wasn't, it changes absolutely nothing. It legitimately means nothing changes at all, but it's just kind of fun, and I like to troll a little bit, and I do like to pick controversial heroes and make them into villains. So that's about it.
All right. So who wants to go first, man? Who wants to go first?
I actually, what I want to do is this. My thought was this. Okay, I know that Kwaku is of the opinion that Columbus is a bad dude, and so what I want to do is basically I want Kwaku to, I guess what I'd like to do is go through maybe, Kwaku, what you think are the worst things that he did specifically, and kind of address them kind of one by one, and see if at the end of this, I'll play defense, which is the harder position. You will make the accusations against him as to what he did. We can explore those in detail and then move on to the next one. So I don't know, maybe we'll get through 3, 4, 5 of the worst allegations against him that show he was just a terrible person. So
all right, Kwaku.
Where would you like to go with that, Kwaku? I'll give it to you.
So the question is, though, we probably should have planned this a little bit better. Because the question here is Columbus, it's Ward Radio. So I'm assuming that we do have to cover does he meet the moral qualifications to be that person, seen by Nephi? I feel like we kind of have to cover that.
Hit it. Go for it. Go
Well,
for it.
I wouldn't even, I would say this before we even meet that qualification. I just want to go through the facts. What specifically did he do or did not do? Once we establish what he did or did not do from your perspective, because there are things that he has done that you know about, or at least that you believe that he has done, that you would say he did this, that's bad. And let's establish the facts first as to what happened. Because people say he's bad. And my first question is to anyone who's like, Columbus is a bad dude, I say, okay, what specifically is the worst thing that he did? So specific.
Okay, so just because we want to go through the specifics of his actions and then talk about how it relates to if he's the person.
Yeah, 100%. Because if we don't know what he actually did that's wrong, let's give him, he's innocent until proven guilty, right? You are saying that he's a bad dude, and so I want to understand what is the case against him that you're going to make in the specific, starting with, I would like to go through, let's say, the top 3 things, but let's start with number 1. The number 1 worst thing that you know that Christopher Columbus did. Let's talk about it.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. Let me pull up my notes here. So I think there's quite a bit we can choose from, but an easy one is encomienda. So Christopher Columbus, when he was the governor of the Hispaniola colony, starting in 1493 to 1500, he enacted a series of laws we call encomienda, which is considered one of the most brutal forms of slavery and torture. And I'm not sure if people realize the amount of people that were killed in Hispaniola under encomienda, but it was around 70,000. Now, this is important. This predates the plagues and the mass sicknesses that went rampant in Central and South America. So 1500 is when he was released of his duties by the crown, when Spain had him arrested and sent back to Europe. And it wasn't after that.
A couple of things here, just real quick. There are a couple of claims that have been made here. Okay.
Yeah.
And I just want to check these real quick, just to understand you. So the encomienda system, and you're saying that 70,000 natives were murdered. What is your citation on that, and where did that person get that specific number?
That's a pretty well-known number. I mean,
it's so I can tell you, I've looked at the primary sources, and there are people that say that this many people died or whatever. I don't know where you're getting that number 70,000 or if it's reliable.
Well, no, I'll look at it. I'll look it up.
How are they keeping track of the number of natives that were dying? Who is doing that? When was that number first given? So, I mean, that's a pretty bold claim to make. And then you're also assuming that they didn't die of the diseases.
Well, so Consuela Varela, I'm going to butcher these names. I don't speak Spanish. Is one of the most foremost Columbus experts and has dedicated their life to studying Christopher Columbus. So I'm mainly going from the academic papers that this person's published.
Okay, so you're going from something that was published by an academic without actually checking where that academic got their sources. Is that correct?
No. I mean, I put this number into all these search engines. And the same thing came by. Well, 70,000.
Yeah, and I'm wondering where the source of that number is that the academics are getting. What is the primary source?
The academics are getting this from the crewmates of Christopher Columbus and the Spanish crown itself.
Okay. So the crewmates of which one specific? Do we have any sort of a specific
from when
reference?
he was governor of the Hispaniola colony?
Okay. I'm gonna put this out there that I would ask people to go and look at some of these numbers. I do not dispute that large numbers of natives died under the encomienda system, but that those that died primarily of diseases. And second of all, Columbus was not the one who implemented the encomienda system. The encomienda system was implemented when he went back on his 3rd voyage, and it was implemented under the orders of the crown for a way to gain control over the rebels there who were rebelling against Columbus, to grant them encomiendas. And what these encomiendas were is it made you like basically you're like a mini king. A person would be given an encomienda, and they were in charge of that particular part of land and to run it as a vassalage of Spain. This is the typical feudal system that was put in place in the Moorish countries that had been conquered by the Spain previously. So this is all part of normal Spanish procedure when colonizing new lands and or handling lands that had been conquered in order to establish order under the Spanish crown. It was not Columbus's idea. It was what he was ordered to do by the crown as he returned on his third voyage to try and get control over the rebellions that were going on against his rule by the Spaniards during the third voyage.
Okay, so
wait, pause,
hold on.
Pause. I've got to respond to. I'm going to respond to this. Okay, so the first one is you're saying you don't dispute the number, but you recognize.
No,
I
do dispute the number. I dispute
the number. You don't know the exact number.
I do not dispute that many.
So how many
natives
would
died
die
because of abuses by Spaniards, and contrary to Columbus's wishes? By the way,
Jacob, pause. Jacob, what is the number that becomes unacceptable? How many natives would have to die where you would say, okay,
I don't know why. Well, it depends on how they're dying and if Columbus was in any way responsible. Remember,
it wasn't until around 1520 that the plagues that we're talking about, these sicknesses, there's no documented evidence of these mass sicknesses until about 1518 to 1520.
Well, what's your evidence of that there weren't any before that? You're just assuming that the illnesses wouldn't have popped up. Illnesses spread very quickly, especially things like smallpox amongst populations that don't have any immunity to these illnesses. It doesn't take long for viruses like, we all know what happened with COVID-19, how quickly it was. It didn't take
but in
30 years for it to spread amongst the population.
Yeah, but in 1493, there's no documented cases of these mass sicknesses coming from Europe yet. We don't have that in the historical record yet, right?
Yeah, but it's very easy to assume that when you insert a group of people into a native population, and second of all of the death that you're talking about at that time, it's not like they had people walking around counting, doing censuses in the local villages.
I think they probably did because they were on direction of the Spanish crown. But we also can't just go from assumptions. We can't just say, well, it's likely. I'm saying
which is why I'm asking you to provide the validation for the 70,000 number that you gave.
Well, hold on. Just before you guys keep going, I will say.
Well, I did. That's the academics I'm quoting.
No, I'm putting this
I
up
know
here.
where they got the number.
I'm putting
I've
this up
at
here.
Sources that hold
on, Jacob. Chill out for a second. Okay, so I'm putting this up on the screen. In Kwaku's defense, and I'm not biased here, all right? I'm not trying to make Columbus out to be a good guy or a bad guy. But so here, I'm looking up Texas Women's University did a whole entire study on La Encomienda, specifically the spark to the Pueblo Revolt. I have not been able to validate the specific 70,000 number. That seems to be an amalgamation that people throw out there. But every study of specific instances that I assume you add together, it is indeed in the thousands. And here's a sentence that I believe does Kwaku's thesis some credit here. It says Christopher Columbus, well, both Kwaku and Jacob here. It says Christopher Columbus was the first to begin using the encomienda system in the Americas. However, it became clear the Spanish encomenderos, grantees of the encomienda, were abusing this system in South America. So in 1574, the crown set in place, quote, new laws to make the system more lawful and end the slavery of Indians. So
you're right. And let me give a clarification. Let's tell the story as it happened. After Columbus was facing rebellion almost from the start amongst all of the settlers who were amongst him. Why were they rebelling against Columbus? They started rebelling against him during his second voyage, and they began rebelling against him because he would not allow them to abuse the natives. By the time that Columbus returns on his third voyage, which, by the way, on his way back from his second voyage, the settlers who went with him, they were starving so badly on the voyage that they were going to throw the natives who were with them overboard so they would have enough food. And guess who stopped them? It was Christopher Columbus. Columbus said, no, they are to be treated as well as any of us. Okay, we're not going to throw the natives overboard so that we have enough food for ourselves. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, well, if I understand you right, you're saying
now
Christopher
hold
Columbus...
on, let's get to the encomienda system. Then he comes, he's there in Spain, but his brother's in charge back in Hispaniola. I want to get into the specifics. The specifics matter. The crown and him had to figure out they were going to try and sort of quell this rebellion, and so when they went back, they gave him orders to implement the encomienda system. When Columbus came back on the third voyage, his entire third voyage when he was in Hispaniola as the governor, quote unquote, he was literally outnumbered by people who were against him on the island. They were under someone named Roldan. Roldan's rebels did not want Columbus or his brother to rule over them. Why? Because his brother made them obey monastic rules of chastity and obedience, and to stop abusing the women.
I gotta call it.
All in the historical record.
I gotta call it. Call it.
I've read the books. I got the sources right here. I can read what they wrote in his journals.
Okay.
Put them in the Discord, and I'll put them on the screen. Put them in the Discord. I'll put them on the screen. Now, before you go, Kwaku. So if I understand, Jacob, you're basically trying to say, similar to Brigham Young, who gets, thrown under the bus for all kinds of things and some harsh words and stuff that happened during his tenure, a lot of this stuff is either exaggerations or wasn't his fault or it could be blamed on other things, is kind of what you're saying, right, Jacob?
Let me just quote real quick Carol Delaney. She's the most recent scholar that wrote the most recent complete biography on him. Here's what she said. Roldan capitalized on the complaints of some of the colonists, this is during the third voyage, who claimed that they were being worked too hard. Bartholomew showed favoritism in distributing the rations and by telling them they could not take native women. In other words, Bartholomew, this is Columbus's brother, who, when he left after the second voyage, was put in charge. He told Roldan, you guys can't take native women. They disliked Bartholomew's imposition of monastic rules of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Roldan rallied his men by promising them food, women, freedom to live wherever they want and to collect gold for themselves. In other words, Columbus wasn't allowing them to do whatever they want, and they rebelled against Columbus because Columbus didn't want them hurting the natives.
Okay, so you're saying Columbus is a goodie, but Roldan is the baddie, and Kwaku's just mistaken. He should be angry at Roldan instead.
He should be mad at Roldan. He should be Francisco de Bobadilla is another one that he should be mad with. Columbus was with a bunch of Spanish conquistadors who all wanted to party and kill and rape and pillage, and Columbus was the guy who's going, no, don't.
Okay,
we got to correct this.
Go, Kwaku,
go. Here. Okay, so Jacob, I see your Bartholomew, and I raise you firsthand witness from Columbus's very own second voyage you just talked about, Michel de Cueno.
Yeah, de Cuneo, I know what you're going to talk about. It's his letter that was discovered in 1880. I know all about it. And apparently,
well, let him finish. Let the poor guy finish.
I already know you're bringing it up, dude.
This is what Michel said. While I was in the boat, I captured a very beautiful woman whom the Lord Admiral Colon, Cristobal Colon, his real name, gave to me. When I had taken her to my cabin, she was naked, as was their custom. I was filled with a desire to take my pleasure with her and attempted to satisfy my desire. She was unwilling, and so treated me with her nails that I wish I had never begun. I then took a piece of rope and whipped her soundly, and she let forth such incredible screams that you would not have believed your ears. Eventually we came to such terms, I assure you, that you would have thought she had been brought up in a school for whores.
Yep, I know
this doesn't sound like a guy who was trying to protect the chastity of women, Jacob.
Okay, so let's talk about Michel de Cuneo's letter. First of all, that letter was discovered in 1880, or in the 1880s. It's a disputed source, but I'm going to say, let's just say it's a legit source. Okay, Michel de Cuneo. There's no indication that Columbus knew what he was going to do with this woman. In fact, there's good reason to believe that the reason that woman was given to Michel de Cuneo was because he was a friend of Columbus that Columbus thought he could trust. Obviously, he couldn't if that indeed is a true story. However, hold on. I'm going to tell you why. Because I have the things from Christopher Columbus's own journals and the journals of those around him of his multiple times that he told them not to take the women. So here's one right here. So on his first voyage, when Columbus found out that the captain of the other ship that he was with had taken peaceful natives as slaves, he was upset and he returned them back to their village. He then wrote to the queen and king about this. This is what he said. Columbus said, and this is Columbus, quote, when he, Pinzon, left here, he took away 4 Indians and 2 girls by force. I have ordered them to be given clothes and taken ashore so that they may go home. Treating them thus can only be to your majesty's benefit. And then he goes on, there's another part in his 4th voyage where the Indians actually bring to Columbus 2 young girls, and they offer them to Columbus basically for sex. And guess what Columbus does? He was shocked. He's like, oh my gosh, these guys are like offering me like little girls, an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old to have sex with. And you know what Columbus does? He brings them in with all of his crew. They feed them, they clothe them, and then they return them back and say thank you so the natives won't get pissed at them. But that's what they did. This happened, and
I'm more than willing to concede that Columbus may not have been Diddy, but I'm not willing to concede that he was not involved in the slave trafficking because
let's talk about the slave trafficking.
Well, hold on, let him finish. Let him finish.
Okay.
No, you, Kwaku, finish.
You go, Kwaku.
Finish your sentence.
Slavery.
Okay, because in a letter from Christopher Columbus in 1493, I believe around that same year you're referring, he says this in his letter to the crown. These people are very simple in matters of war, as you will see from the 7 I have sent to you, meaning the ones he trafficked from Hispaniola to Spain. They could learn our language and then be returned, unless you want me to bring more of them to Spain or keep them captive here. Because with 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want. That is in a letter from Columbus, October 14th, 1493. So what we're seeing here, and this is what I want to get to.
Hold on. Can I respond to that letter? Hold on, before you go into point,
just let him finish. You spoke for a long time. Let Kwaku finish what he's saying.
If he makes a point, I want to respond to the point so I can go one point at a time.
Okay, let him finish what he's saying.
Let's finish it here. I believe Christopher Columbus, when you take these quotes all together, because he has quotes where he is seemingly sounding like a great person, and then you've got firsthand testimony and other quotes from his same journals where he's being a terrible person. We have his crewmates who were saying he chopped off their hands, chopped off their noses.
Hold on, you got to bring up. Hold on, if you're going to make accusations,
I'm writing them down. I'm writing them down.
I'm almost done. Let me just wrap it up. I'm almost done.
Let's take those quotes one at a time. I know
is a double-speaking, violent con artist. Evil people speak out of both sides of their mouth. I think it's clear from the record that's what this guy did. I don't think you can obviously.
That's your opinion because you don't know the record fully, Kwaku. Like, I know the whole story here and the context of all of these letters that you're talking about. Second of all, most of these quotes and things you're bringing up about just so everyone knows, most of the quotes that you find online talking about him cutting off people's ears and doing all this horrible stuff, they're all part of something that happened at the end of the 3rd voyage. Francisco de Bobadilla was sent by the crown with these orders. He knew that there was a rebellion, that things, that Columbus was dealing with Roldan's rebels during the 3rd voyage. The crown sent Bobadilla with these orders. They said, Bobadilla, here's your deal. You go over there and see what's going on. And if you think that it's not going well, you go ahead and take over and you can be the governor of Hispaniola. Now, you could imagine Bobadilla goes, that's nice. If I find that there are any problems here, I get to rule this place. So guess what Francisco de Bobadilla does? He shows up, he goes and finds all of Roldan's rebels. And by the way, he immediately found 2 Spaniards hanging from the gallows. Why had they been hung? Because they had been abusing natives and Columbus wouldn't tolerate it. He was so enraged, Bobadilla was, when he saw 2 Spaniards being killed because they were abusing natives. He was so infuriated, he immediately went to Roldan's rebels. And he said, you guys give me all the testimony you guys can against Columbus, because that would validate his ability to send Columbus back to Spain in chains and to go before the crown with all these testimony from all the people who hated him. And that's exactly what happened. So when most people cite the accusations against Columbus by the Spaniards, look at the source. They almost every single one of them go back to the affidavits that were collected by Francisco de Bobadilla to oust Christopher Columbus by talking to the rebels. And guess what? You know what Bobadilla did as soon as he got control in the 3rd voyage? After that, he went and he told all the men, guess what? Do whatever you want. This thing's probably going to get shut down by the
I'm not
crown
here
anyway,
to
so
defend
just do what you
Bobadilla.
want.
Jacob, I'm not here to defend Bobadilla. These people can all go to HELL. I don't care. Like, these are all equally terrible people. I don't. This
No,
isn't
they're not
everybody
equally terrible.
is
That's
great
the
except
point.
for
Columbus
what
was
I'm
trying
saying.
to stop these people.
Okay,
That's
okay,
why there was
Jacob.
a
He
rebellion.
wasn't. You know how I know he wasn't? Because all I have to do is continue to read his journals. Like from March 4th, 1493 to the crown. I can send you so many slaves that their number is countless and they will be idol worshippers because you can't send the converted slaves, right? How many of these, hey, Spanish crown, I'll send you slave quotes do you need until you realize he was probably sending slaves? And you have to
Okay,
think about
hold
this.
on. Let me
If
let
you
me let
have
me
his
address the
crew,
slavery
the
one and the
natives
slaves
and the
that were sent
crown
back.
that all
Because I
hate
know
him.
all about this stuff.
The
Let me
crew,
address it.
the natives and the crown all hated him and said he was abusive. If
No, the
everyone
crown
surrounding
actually,
him
the
said he
crown
was
was on his side
well,
until
why was he
they
relieved
didn't
of his
give
duties
him
then?
back control of the colony because they knew that he didn't have the popular support of the people that were there, and because he would not allow them to do whatever they wanted.
So just to be clear, you're saying the only reason his crew hated him is because he was there defending the natives, and everyone got it wrong.
Why did Roldan rebel against Columbus and Bartholomew, his brother?
Um, Based on what I've read, yes, these were psycho tyrants, and he was not letting them extend the full arm of debauchery. Fine,
Okay,
fine.
so you're actually admitting that the reason they rebelled against Columbus was because Columbus was taking measures to protect the natives from their abuses.
I wouldn't go that far. You still need to have some order when you are the governor of a colony. And if you have all of your men completely going rampant, you're stopping the workforce, you're creating absolute chaos. He needs to have some form of control. But just because Jeffrey Epstein was better at control doesn't mean P. Diddy was innocent. That's what I'm saying. These are
No, here's
equally
what I'm
bad
saying.
people.
Here's the point. Let's address the slavery one real quick. Okay.
30
Calling
minutes.
Columbus, by
You
the
got
way.
30 minutes, guys. 30 minutes. It's hard to believe, but we've
Hold
already been
on.
doing this for 31 minutes. So, okay.
Okay. So let's talk about what was going on. I'll just read what Carol Delaney said about these slaves. Well, first of all, you have to recognize something. Do you have any documented evidence, Kwaku, of Columbus sending back a slave who was not ultimately engaged in warfare against the colonies?
If by warfare you mean rebellion against being enslaved, is that what you mean warfare?
No. I mean that. Did you know that? Are you familiar? Do you know who Guacanagri was?
Probably not off the top of my head. No.
Yeah. So Guacanagri was the chief who helped Columbus and was on his side all the way through. Did you know that Columbus actually had people voluntarily want to go back with him back to Spain who are natives? That they actually had to figure out who they were going to pick at the end of his first voyage to go back with him to Spain.
Jacob, none of those happy anomalies justify the enslavement and mass murder.
Okay, so let's talk about the enslavement then. Here's what happened with the slaves. The only people that Columbus, quote unquote, enslaved were people who actually were engaged in warfare against them. In other words, they were violent and they were almost always cannibals, by the way. Columbus actually engaged in a war allied with Guacanagri against the cannibal tribe that was fighting against Guacanagri's people. Just so you know, Columbus and Guacanagri were very good friends, like a genuine friendship between those two, and Guacanagri's tribe. And so when Columbus and Guacanagri fought against the cannibals who were killing Guacanagri's people, it is true that the Carib cannibalistic tribes were taken prisoner by Columbus and sent back to Spain. And when he did, he said, I'll just read this real quick. This is from Carol Delaney's book. With the ships, Columbus sent back cinnamon, pepper, cotton, parrot, sandalwood, and some gold samples they had collected in order to show the enterprise would be profitable. In addition to the materials, Columbus also sent 26 Indians from the man-eating Caribs. In doing this, he was following the papal policy at the time, which permitted enslavement of those captured in a just war or who resisted Christianization, or those who went against the law of nature. The Caribs appeared to fit all three definitions. They had fought against the Christians and had convened the acts of nature through their acts of cannibalism. And his hope in sending them, he said, he did not say, let's send them back to Spain and turn them into our servants and slaves. He said, let's send them back, teach them our language, and try to make them civilized.
Okay.
If we went into a land that was full of cannibals and you wanted to send them to our civilization to learn our language and to learn to stop eating people, you can call that barbarous slavery. I call that helping people to become human beings.
I understand what you're saying. The only problem is I think it's bunk. Do you know why? Because I'm going to quote Columbus talking about sending those cannibal slaves. I'm going to read exactly what he said about his intentions with those cannibal slaves, sending them to Spain. And this is again, I don't speak Spanish, so I'm going to butcher this. From the Relaciones y Cartas de Cristobal Colón, we could pay for the expedition with slaves from among these cannibals, a people very strong and fit for the purpose, well proportioned, and quick to comprehend. If we strip them of their humanity, we think they will be better than any other slaves.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, so and also, so I mean, to me, that doesn't sound like
I'd have to check that source because I would. Here's the thing. What here? Let me give you some other things. Let me give you some other things that happened.
Wait, hold on. Let Kwaku finish.
I got to finish my thought here. But also, Jacob, I think you've made two errors. The first error you made was I call the Turkish error. The Turkish error is how Turkish politicians will deny the Armenian aside, but then will say, okay, actually, they deserved it. Every time you watch debates about Christopher Columbus, it's at first a denial of the slavery, and then actually,
no, it's not a denial of the slavery. It's just the facts of what he was doing. The people you can't name any person. You cannot provide any historical examples, Kwaku, of him sending back people who were not involved in warfare against them.
But that's moving the goalpost. That's moving the goalpost. The minute you start saying this is warfare, what that means, it's rebellion against the colonization. That's what's being considered warfare. And then second, anyone who is involved in this sort of colonialism and slavery, whatever, they're always going to come up with ways to justify.
So is your problem with Christopher Columbus or with colonization?
We don't listen to the mustache man reasons why he wanted to subjugate Jewish people. He had a million reasons to do it. Every single time people want to commit atrocities, they always come up with a reason to do it.
Columbus didn't even hold on. You're making a whole bunch of assumptions here that aren't correct. Columbus didn't even. He was trying his best to bring people into the normal vassalage of Spain that was the standard practice in the feudal age of every single person there. Okay, which means to be a vassal of the crown is exactly what he expected the Indians to be. He said, "Look, this is the way feudal politics works," and it worked among the natives as the natives were cannibalizing each other, they were conquering each other, and it was feudal systems and everything. Are you familiar, Kwaku, with what a vassal is and how vassalage works?
Yeah.
Yes, Jacob, but I'm reading his words.
Oh, wait, but
I know. And what I'm saying
okay, hold on.
He's saying, hey, I got a bunch. Let's send them back. It'll be great. They're really fit. We can do whatever we want with these people.
Actually, let me read.
That's from his journals. He's saying it. I'm not.
Well, look, if they had a protein-only diet, they were probably shredded, all right? You know, I mean, if you're a cannibal.
I'm not quoting his ex-girlfriend, Jacob.
Okay, so here's my question. Why is it that in his letters to the king and queen, when he talked about the people that were being sent, he explicitly would say his goal was to convert them to Christianity? Because did you know that if you were converted to Christianity, you couldn't be enslaved in Queen Isabella's Spain?
Well,
but why, if he wanted them to be slaves, why would he want them to be Christians? Because you can't be a slave when you're a Christian.
Right, Jacob, I know, but that's why in the quote I read, I included the part of the quote where he said they will be idol worshippers because he wanted some of them to stay idol worshippers so they could be slaves.
No, he did not want them to be idol worshippers. In fact, let me read you right here from Lawrence Bergreen, his master plan, and this is exactly what people see. He wrote to the crown multiple times, really frustrated that the friars that they were sending weren't interested in working and converting the natives and teaching them the gospel. He was really mad about that and said, you need to send me better friars so that we can convert these people to Christianity. He said, this is what Bergreen says. He says, quote, his master plan consisted of baptizing every Indian in the major towns and hamlets of Hispaniola so they could serve their highnesses like the vassals, in other words, like a feudal citizen
And Jacob,
of
that worked out
Castile.
really well. Was he baptizing them in hot boiling oil?
No, in fact, he was. You can find no instances of that. In fact, you can find him defending the natives. The only natives that he sent back to Spain were the ones who were fighting against them in the islands and that weren't peaceful. His goal was to convert them. If he wanted them to be slaves, why? Here's my question for you. If he wanted them to be slaves, why was he trying to convert them all to Christianity?
Jacob, I'm saying he's a double-speaking liar. I'm saying he didn't want them to be converted. If I go into any place and my goal with my pure heart is to get these people to turn to the gospel, and then 7 years later, 50, let's say 50,000 are dead. I have failed so miserably, I should be completely and forever a laughingstock. When my
Cardin, you want to jump in here?
No, Kwaku, finish, and then I'll say something. Finish, Kwaku.
When I'm writing in my journals, double speak, oh, I just want to convert them. They're great people. Don't worry, Crown. Don't worry. And then, yeah, you know what? Actually, some of these people, yeah, no, let's keep them idol worship. Let's send them back. We can subjugate these people. We can strip them of their humanity. This is how psychopaths act. Jacob, they lie.
Here, let me read you this. Let me read you this.
Well, hold on. I got to say something.
Sorry,
I got to say one thing. So first off, I think I see a minor flaw in both of your arguments here. I'll start with just Jacob on the left. I get your thesis that, okay, hey, hold on a second. Some of this was disease. He was actually kind of, let's not be presentists here. He was trying to, bring these natives into the vassalage of the Spanish crown, which he thought was a good thing. And it was these other rebellious people that wanted to treat them horribly that he was stopping that actually made him fall out of favor with the aristocracy. And he's getting unfairly blamed and overly besmirched, right? I get that. But at the same token, I could kind of see where Kwaku's coming from in the sense that, like, don't you see the massive arrogance in saying, well, look, we're just trying to colonize you like the rest. And if you don't like it, now you're enemy combatants and we can now legally just decimate you, right? I mean, if all of a sudden all the progmos just walked into one of my churches and said, okay, well, we're just planting the LGBTQ flag here and saying that you all have to worship Kamala Harris and you better not rebel because there's men with guns outside. And the second you rebel, well, we'll just take you to the front lawn and shoot you because now we can kill you because you're actual enemy combatants of the New World Order, right?
Now, here's my question. Do you make a distinction between a slave and a prisoner of war?
No, yes. Just like in the Geneva Convention, there's a distinction between covert operators and uniformed soldiers. There's distinctions between all these levels of things. But
so did Columbus go in and just go into villages of innocent people, round them up as slaves, and send them back to Spain?
That's hyperbole.
He never did that.
That's hyperbole.
He never did that.
But you can see.
In fact, he went into the native villages, and the very first thing they would always do is they would go in and they would trade with the villages to try and make peace with them, to bring them into vassalage. Now, you can say, well, vassalage, that's terrible. Well, you guys have in the feudal world, this is how it worked. Like, more powerful kingdoms, the same things would happen with the natives. In fact, Guacanagri, here's what happens. Columbus shows up to Guacanagri during the first voyage. And one of the things he does is he does what any feudal person would do in the politics of that time. He shows them the military power of the Spaniards. Why did he do that? Because he went and shot cannons, for example. It was to show Guacanagri that, look, we're more powerful than you. What happens in a feudal system is when you have a more powerful lord show up to your land, they say, look, you can either join our team or you can fight against us. Guacanagri said, we'll join you, Spain. This is the same thing the natives would do. In fact, Guacanagri immediately goes to Columbus and he says, Columbus, you can now help me, now that we're on the same team, against my enemies. Okay?
I get that.
Feudal politics 101.
Jacob.
And the goal was not to bring them into slavery, but to bring them into vassalage in the kingdom.
Hold on. Let me finish. I'm saying, okay, so, Jacob, I get all of that he's not as bad as people say. I think Kwaku's wrong on some things, and we'll get to Kwaku's part in a second. But for a guy that says taxation is theft and then goes through the logical conclusion of it not being a voluntary acquisition of goods, can't you say that colonization is also theft? Therefore,
Yeah,
I
no,
think,
I don't have a
hold on,
problem.
let me get to the end of my sentence. Okay. Is that therefore, if the question is, was Columbus good or bad, and colonization is bad, the lowest hanging fruit of Kwaku's argument is that as the agent of colonization, though he's not as bad as the woke schools want to make him, is that bad enough to be considered bad?
If you're a presentist, sure. And so would every other person in the United
Okay.
States, including the Latter-day Saints, who went and took over the land of the Native Americans. Your
Okay, fine.
ancestors
Well,
are evil.
that's the
And by
answer.
the way, everyone listening to this, if that's your standard, are complicit in a system of the conquest of native
Okay,
lands
that's
and
fair.
living in land that doesn't belong
That's fair.
to
Now,
you.
Kwaku, there's one small, that was my little problem with Jacob's logic, right? Now, here's one of my problems with what some of your arguments you've made.
All right, let's hear it.
So you're saying, okay, I think Christopher Columbus was a psychopath and he was guilty of doublespeak. He'd tell the crown what they wanted to hear so the aristocracy could think that he was a great noble colonizer. But then behind closed doors in his own journals, he was raping and pillaging and being a baddie, right? Okay. Well, what's the limit of that form of logic? Because if you want to quote his journals, but at any given time you can logically say, well, this is doublespeak, then you can kind of create Christopher Columbus in your own image, because whenever he says something that would exonerate him, well, you could say, well, he's just double speaking. Or when you, like, do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
That's like, you either have to trust
Yeah.
what he's saying or not.
So that's why earlier on I said we have to put the restored gospel context into this conversation, or else, I mean, it's like we could sit down and debate about Santa Anna and the Battle of the Alamo.
Okay.
But okay, at some point, yeah, we recognize the Wild Wild West sucked. It wasn't a great place to be. It was pretty terrible. People got cholera. You got shot by arrows. It was terrible. And you had to choose your hard. Sometimes you had to be a frontiersman, and sometimes you had to be a cowboy. Sometimes you had to steal. I understand that. But this debate is just about what is the best way to be a bloodthirsty colonist and what is the worst way. But that's not really the debate, because we're Latter-day Saints. We have to bring in the extra on top of that, which is, okay, we've established the kind of colonization Cristobal Colon engaged in. And if he was doing or even helping or facilitating the death of, let's even go lower, over 10,000 people, okay? Laura Bush killed one guy and never heard the end of it. This guy killed over 10,000. We can all agree on that. Prisoners
Wait.
of war.
Columbus personally killed 10,000 people?
Okay, Mustache Man didn't personally shoot 6 million people, but he facilitated
Yeah, but
it. With
here's
blood's on his
here's
hands,
my
right?
can I go through something
Blood's
real
on
quick?
his hands.
This
But
is
let
really
me finish my
important.
thought. Let me finish
All
my
right,
thought real
fine. Finish your
quick.
thought.
The end of the thought is, so if facilitating bloody, violent colonialism while professing to be a Christian, professing to understand the book of Exodus, overtly anti-slavery, and the teachings of Jesus Christ, completely anti-slavery, and professing to be someone bringing the gospel, we should be judging him by the standards of the gospel. So it's not a presentist lens. People didn't discover the book of Exodus 10 years ago and go, wow, we shouldn't enslave people. They knew about it back then, especially if we're now claiming he was this Christian hero. So as Latter-day Saints, we have to say, does this man fit that profile of what Nephi was talking about? So I understand the debate here, but I'm not here. I'm not the blue hair from Berkeley saying, okay, he was so evil and everybody from before 1950 was evil. I understand, Jacob, my ancestors, and I'm related to the guy in Ghana that chased out all the witches and killed them. Like, I am a direct descendant of someone who killed like 1,000 witches, okay? I understand it. Our ancestors have done some crazy stuff. But I want to be like we got to bring in the restored gospel element and say, okay, if this man is a Christian hero and professing to convert these people and is someone we should look up to and honor as a Christian hero, we should judge him by the standards of the Bible. And he violated those standards, violated them incredibly. And we
You
don't
keep
just get to say, well, actually, you're a product of your time. Because if that's true, then if the church tomorrow allowed same-sex sealings, your grandchildren should be okay with it because it was just the norm. And we all know you are very opposed to ever changing,
Okay.
the sealing ceremony. So we
Okay,
can't be
so
playing it
so let
both
me
ways.
address this real quick. So Kwaku's got a lot of opinions and hot air and claims that he makes, but he doesn't generally back them up here with specific sourced data. He does have out of context quotes. That's what Kwaku brings to this. Now, if he
Out of
wants to bring these,
context,
if he
Jacob,
wants to bring, hold on, real quick, let me finish my thought.
Okay.
So Kwaku brings a bunch of, or not even that many out of context quotes, but he has a few, the
Jeez.
typical ones you can find online. However, we can look at Columbus's actions. And when I say context, Kwaku doesn't know the context. He doesn't know the story of Guacanagri. He doesn't know about the rebellion that happened during the second voyage and how it continued into the third voyage. He doesn't understand what happened with Francisco de Bobadilla and the interplays of those things. Now we can look though, here's how we can tell about Columbus's actions. He's saying he's speaking out of both sides of his mouth. Well, actions speak louder than words. Let's go through Columbus's actions real quick. First of all, on the first voyage, he returns the girls that the other ship had taken. Okay? He said, no, you can't take these people by force if they're being peaceful, sends them back. He rescues on his second voyage multiple natives that had been taken by the Caribs. He rescues them from being eaten and killed and takes them back to their villages. He allies himself with Guacanagri, becomes great friends with him. He's offered girls for sex on his fourth voyage, which he turns down and returns them. He does the to preserve food. The other members of his crew at the end of his third voyage, they were going to throw natives overboard. Columbus says, no, you're not doing that. They are to be treated with the same respect as the rest of us. Okay. And he wouldn't allow Roldan and his rebels to abuse them. When you add up all these things, and there's more than just that, those are just the ones I can think of off the top of my head. The picture of the man emerges when you add his actions with that versus when you take out of context quotes or dubious sources like Michel de Cuneo's letter, and which, by the way, even if it is true, doesn't show that Christopher Columbus did anything. And people don't realize this. Columbus's journeys were entirely about
Jacob, I think you're being
him against the Spanish, who were acting like total barbarians to the natives.
Jacob, I think you have complete blinders on here. Every single example you just named of look at the good he was doing with these slaves. First of all, let's get the base here. They shouldn't have been there colonizing anybody. So the first big sin is sending their ships there to start colonizing. So whenever you engage in that, you're immediately no longer a righteous.
Okay, so
holding.
everyone who lived in the
finish.
feudal world that participated in feudal politics is a bad guy. This is presentism. This is presentism all the way down.
Jacob, it's not presentism if you believe the gospel's been on the earth since Adam, and these people should be held accountable to those gospel standards. But second, let me finish my thought.
That could have been during apostasy.
Yeah, by the way, we need to get to that conversation. How we're talking about a leader on the great apostasy. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
But let's hone this in. It would not have benefited Cristobal Colon for a bunch of naked teenage girls being sent to the crown. He would look, that's not what they wanted to see. So of course he's sending those people back, but it's not as if he's on the island just chilling, going, all right, let's make sure everything's okay. Don't send those girls. People are being starved, they're being beaten, they're being tortured, they're being whipped, they're being killed while he is overseeing it. Just because he doesn't allow them to ship and traffic teenage girls over the water doesn't mean he's not also doing barbarous and horrific things there on the island. It's like you're having goggles and you're refusing to see everything else that's going on. When you kill
I've
over
seen
10,000
everything that's going on. That's why I'm making the claim. I've actually read all the books. Do you know who
you're saying these quotes are out of
De las
context,
Casas is? Do you know
yes,
who
Bartholomew de las Casas. Yes.
Bartolomé de las Casas. What was
Yes, and I
now
know
he
he
was
was
an
kind of a
Indian,
liar.
he was a native, he was like a native activist. He fully
Yeah.
was against what the Spaniards had done. What was his opinion of Christopher Columbus?
Okay, so
Would you like for me to read his
that,
opinion of Christopher Columbus? Should I trust Las
I know
Casas
that-
or you, Kwaku?
Well, let me finish. I know that De Las Casas is the one person you've got to be dubious of when you're researching Christopher Columbus. He was extremely biased. He pretended to be places he wasn't, and he lied a lot.
So he's
Okay?
like Brian Williams in the helicopter, you're saying?
I don't know that reference.
Oh, Brian Williams is the reporter that said he was in the helicopter, like flying over some war zone, and then it was proven that he like completely lied about it, and so he got like fired for totally lying. So you're saying like, okay, well the guy's a faker. You don't take his reporting too seriously.
What I'm looking at, I'm not going into this trying to prove. I want you to remember, there's an episode of Saints Unscripted where I'm defending Christopher Columbus. Okay, I was totally fine with him. And then I started reading his journals and said, oh, not the guy. Not the guy. Okay.
No, you've read quotes from his journals because I've read the journals and I know I've read the same stuff as you.
Jacob,
but the other thing is I know the context of those journals and what was said.
Jacob, can I ask you one question?
What's that question?
Okay. If you discovered a journal of Hillary Clinton and she had one quote about taking slaves somewhere, you and Greg Mattson would have a video up in 5 minutes talking about when you have a dozen quotes.
So you have to throw out. So we have to throw out George Washington. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. We have to throw out Thomas Jefferson, all the founding fathers.
Not all of them. John Adams is great. John Quincy Adams is great. Alexander Hamilton, Horn Dog.
All right. So here's the thing, though.
You gotta remember, guys, I'm consistent here. I am completely consistent. I think George Washington was a Jabulon worshiping.
So let me just make sure I understand. Your issue is that Christopher Columbus was involved in the colonization of the Americas and took prisoners of war that he sent back to Spain.
Just like Pharaoh, and it was proven to be evil back then. So how can it not be evil when Columbus did?
Fine, I have no problem with that. If you want to say that this conflict between the natives and that in the feudal system, anytime any person that was involved in a feudal takeover of another land, that's evil every single time, and anyone involved with it, we have to say that that's sufficient justification to say they were a bad person.
No. This is a really important part. You can let people be people in history. But what I'm saying is the minute we start to elevate certain people as Christian heroes, then that's where I get involved in this conversation and say, no, pause.
Was Christopher Columbus better than most of the people of his time? Was he better than the Spaniards he was with?
Most people in the world did not participate in the subjugation of natives.
Oh, come on, answer the question, though. You got to answer the question. Jacob asked a decent question.
I don't. No, that's my answer. Most people in the world were not involved in colonization.
Yeah, I'm asking about the other Spanish leaders that he was among. Was he the best among them? That were during the years that he was there? Who was better than Christopher Columbus in their treatment of the natives?
Okay, that's like asking me, was Ghislaine Maxwell better than Kevin Spacey?
Well, so then answer the question. Which one? Come on, that's a dodge, bro. That's a dodge.
No, it's not a dodge. I consider it to be just I consider it to be irrelevant. Okay, yeah, the guy who killed 1,000.
So the only, all right, let me agree with you on something, Kwaku. I'll agree with you on something. Christopher Columbus did participate in the feudal takeover of new lands.
Yes.
He attempted to do it peacefully, as he did with Guacanagri's tribe.
Pause. Is there a peaceful way to take over someone's land?
Yes, you go to them and you say, we are now going to take over this land, and you can join us and become part of our new nation, of our
You're
kingdom.
saying in the feudal way. You wouldn't do that nowadays, because
the feudal. This is the feudal world, and this would happen all the time.
Okay. Well, by the way, guys, we got a buttload of super chats here that we gotta to get to, and on Elon Musk's platform, part of the multi-stream is that
on Twitter. Yeah, they're
part of the multi-stream rules of engagement is you don't name other platforms, right? So on Elon's platform, we got a buttload of people watching right now, and I got to get to some questions they got as well. So anyway, finish.
Hold up real quick. Can I make one quick plug just for everybody watching?
Okay.
This is very important. Go to my channel. You don't know the story of Christopher Columbus. Kwaku couldn't give me an overview of the third voyage, even in the vague generalities of what happened. Okay? He doesn't know the story. Most people don't know the story.
That's not fair. That's not true. I'm
Then give it to me. Give me the third voyage. What happened on his third voyage?
Jacob, I quoted
No,
from
no.
it. But
Give me the general historical context of the third voyage.
I know that trick. Ben Shapiro uses it all the time.
Okay, then do the second voyage.
I know you're training guys. I'm not falling for it.
Give me a brief overview.
What I'm saying.
I mean, you got to at least know the basics of his story.
Well, here, he can think up that.
How about the fourth voyage? What did he do on his fourth voyage?
Gordon, can I interject here?
Okay, I want to give this.
I want to give everybody this.
Go watch on my channel. I have laid out all of the story of Christopher Columbus in its details. And then you can go, and I'm going to be posting on my website all of these sources and quotes that I'm going through that you've never read before. Because if you go online, you can find all these little one-off quotes out of context. But Jacob, I will give you the context, and then I will give you the quote showing what Christopher Columbus.
Okay, so hold on.
There's a wait, Carden, give me 1 minute.
Okay.
There's a level of freakery going on here. Okay, so let me be absolutely clear. The reason why I refuse to answer some of the questions Jacob asked me is because I know the traps he uses. Guys, I know Jacob. I know how he debates. I'm not going to walk into a trap. I know when you're setting up traps. Okay, I know when you're doing it. Okay, because
or you just don't know.
You've got to stay on brand with what you're talking about. And my goal here is to say, if we're trying to elevate this man as a Christian hero, we should read his words and ask, are his intentions and did the result of those intentions, do they lead up? Or do they measure up to what we
Which is why people should go watch everything that I've written or actually know the full story and the whole context of all the quotes that you've got.
Okay.
Who's got a lot of quotes.
Okay, you've said that.
I have the actual.
You got your minute. You got your minute.
He was so bad at his job, the Crown said, hey, no more.
Then why did they
the
send
Crown
him back
is the
after he
baddies.
was arrested without any charges against him and drop all the charges at the end of the third voyage?
Okay, so hold on.
I know he didn't spend the rest of his life in prison. I know that. He was
they exonerated him entirely. They said all the charges were false. Why did they do that?
I would argue against that. I don't think that's the case. He was definitely pardoned, but the fact of the matter is
no. They said that they knew that the allegations were not true.
Thousands of people still died. He is still responsible for the death of thousands of people. And
I'm talking about the claims against him at the end of his third voyage made by Roldan and those guys. When he showed up, the Crown saw Columbus coming chains, and everybody knew it was a travesty and that it was an illegitimate ousting by Bobadilla.
Jake, that's nonsense. You're saying from 1493 to 1500, nobody died under Columbus.
I need to get to these super chats. We're going to burn through them. We're going to burn.
Tens of thousands died in that 7-year period.
Bro, we're burning through these super chats. Okay, we're burning through these super chats. Danny Gray, thank you very much for joining. Diamond Dave says, don't know enough to have an opinion, just to join a 3-day weekend and here to give you money. Thank you, Danny. Ashton J. Productions.
Watch my channel. You'll get the information.
Okay. Ashton J. Productions says, hello, boys. So ready for this. Mike Smith says, why is this an either-or question? Is it possible to be inspired by God to start, then lose your way? His journals point to this. Interesting question. Professor Chimp says, as mentioned, his likely presence in the Book of Mormon is irrelevant to this debate, but it's interesting how the spirit, quote, came down and Columbo means dove. Interesting, Professor Chimp. Robert Hall says, Jacob, you need to slow down and let others speak. Yeah, Jacob. Just kidding. Clayton says, Kwaku, is all colonization bad? Question mark. Don't answer that one yet. We'll get to it. Robert Hall says, Hansen, you're not debating, you're railroading. Jeez, man, I wouldn't say it's railroading. That's a little bit rough. Richard Gank says, Columbus took a few slaves. Those he did were literally violent or cannibals. And by the way, the only reason why I take a little bit issue with this whole cannibal thing, just from an outsider's perspective, is almost every Indian tribe that was ever enslaved was accused of cannibalism. And it's kind of like, I don't think Hillary Clinton was a good woman, but I don't think she's guilty of every single thing she's accused of, or else like when she woke up in the morning, she can't be a lizard person and an Illuminati and a Freemason and, in Bohemian Grove at the same time.
Would you like me to read the doctor who was on board and what they found at the second voyage?
I would love it at the end of these super chats. So anyway, the Pueblo Indians are accused of being cannibals, but from what I understand, archaeologically, there's little evidence that could actually prove that, unlike the Carib tribe. So I'm not saying it's germane to this specific argument, but I think too many tribes have been accused of cannibalism as a justification for colonization for me to believe that it's true every time. So Richard continues, said that's pretty merciful IMO. Gid Donut says, what we need is more context for the por una mujer también se falle siente. Okay, and he gives the whole phrase in Spanish. He says, it could easily be descriptive rather than prescriptive. Yes. And last two, Thuggy says, my view is that people are multifaceted and can do great good or great evil. People are messy creatures. And then Robert Hall says Jacob is engaging in relativism. Man, there's 3 anti-Jacob quotes. I'm going to block these people. Jacob's my friend. Screw them. No, I'm just kidding, dude. I'm totally
definitely
kidding.
Not engaging in
Okay,
relativism.
so who was up? Who was up?
You kind of are, though.
Kwaku.
I mean, you kind of are, right? So the same vein that people are saying I'm engaging in presentism, you are engaging in relativism, because if you're not engaging in some form of presentism, which I think it's biblical standard is actually what we're using, you are saying, well, the other guys were really, really evil. He was a level 4 bad. They were a level 10. Well, I mean, doesn't really matter. Does it hold up to the standard of a Christian hero is the ultimate argument I'm making, and I'm saying no. So it is sort of relativism.
Well, if he's defending the natives,
but the standard at the time doesn't matter if we're trying to uphold a Christian hero.
Oh, yeah, but hold on. If what Jacob says is true from these other primary sources, though, this is where now I push back on you, Kwaku, is if what Jacob says is true and that others were trying to defend them, and 50,000 miles away from his home, he's risking his neck for a bunch of natives that he could easily just let get abused by this Bartholomew guy, then that kind of is Christian.
You mean you're talking
Bobadilla, sorry.
Roldan and Bobadilla.
Yeah, Roldan and
perfectly fine with it, and others, many others.
Yeah, this is like a scene from a Christian hero movie. I mean, if he's stepping in to keep the real baddies from abusing the natives, when he could just get rich.
Revisionist history, because that would be
I don't know. He was reading some primary sources, man.
That would be true if we didn't have the tens of thousands of people that were still on the island being killed under his watch. And that's not disputed. That's what he was doing.
Okay, so, shout out to Fidget the Crazy.
Hold on. That we're being killed because of Columbus or despite Columbus' efforts?
Jacob, if you're making the claim that every single person killed by Columbus's order was a cannibal, and there's not one innocent person.
Can you give me a specific instance where Columbus ordered on one of the voyages? Give me the specific voyage where Columbus ordered the death of a native. Go.
Give you a specific voyage where encomienda.
No. Encomienda is not sentencing a native to death. The encomienda system is a system of feudal vassalage that is set up by Spain and he was ordered to implement.
See, that's wordplay.
No, you made a claim. You made a claim
on this. Made the academics. I'm referencing here. Varela, this academic that I quoted earlier, said
I'm referencing the person who wrote
savage
the most
and barbaric
recent biography. The person who wrote the most recent biography, Carol Delaney, who is the leading expert currently on Columbus biography, she agrees with all the things I'm saying, by the way.
Yeah, you can do your academic battle. I'm sure you'll debate someone who quotes Dan McClellan, and I think you'll have a bit of a friend.
That's fine. That's why I say we go to the primary sources and the things that are just established as historical fact.
Well, you're not even considering quotes from his journal that I've read as primary sources. So the whole primary source thing.
No, I'm not. Which quote are you talking about specifically? I've considered all of them.
Okay, well, you said they're out of context. I don't know what context makes
it depends which one you're talking about.
But any of them I gave. But to hone in the point, the encomienda system from 1493 to 1500 that Columbus was overseeing resulted in the death of tens of thousands. That's just how it is.
You're actually incorrect in your date on the beginning of the encomienda system. The encomienda system was implemented during the third voyage, which was after 1493. Is what
you were referencing, but encomienda in the practice from 1493 to 1500 under Columbus, that was For sure, that was real. It
Was
wasn't
that Columbus's
officialized by
idea, or was
Spain.
that implemented by or was it the crown that asked him to do that?
That was Columbus. It wasn't officialized by Spain until after, and they made it less barbaric.
No,
True.
no, no,
That's
no.
what you referenced earlier.
I think you're incorrect there. The encomienda system was taken by Columbus at the beginning of his third voyage to help establish order during the rebellion against Columbus, to try and give power to the rebels
To help
over certain
establish
areas.
order, that sounds like to continue to subjugate because they're rebelling.
No, it
Because we're
wasn't.
trying a feudal
I'm not talking about a
takeover.
rebellion of the natives. Do you know what happened during the third voyage?
Yeah,
Who
I know
rebelled
his
against
crew
Columbus
turned on
during
him.
the third
But-
voyage?
but
It
no,
wasn't the
you're
natives.
derailing. What
The
I'm saying is
natives rebelled against him
Jacob,
during the second voyage,
Jacob, you
and
asked
they
the
were
question,
defeated in a
and I
battle.
name
You don't
any
know the
time
story.
that Christopher Jacob, you asked the question. Can you name one time he had natives killed? I answered, and now you're saying, well, actually, on the third voyage, his crew turned against him.
I asked
I don't
you
really give a damn.
specifically
I'm
when he
saying
sentenced
from
a native to death.
1493 to 1500,
When
natives
did
being
Columbus
killed
order
under
a
his
native
watch?
killed?
Okay, well, guys, we got limited time
I
left.
answered it. 1493 to 1500. That encomienda system, before it was
The
officialized by
encomienda
Spain,
system wasn't
tens
begun in
of-
1493.
Jacob, it was, whether you want to recognize that or not. That system of barbaric colonialism he was engaged in that wasn't officialized till Spain later. He did
No,
it.
in the second voyage,
1493
it
to
wasn't a voyage of permanent settlement and colonization. The second voyage's entire purpose was to set up a mining and
You were
trading
saying,
post.
okay, you
It
were
was
saying
in the
no-
third voyage that they began to
Jacob,
the
you're
system
saying
to
that
actually
nobody's
long-term
killed.
colonize it.
You were
You
saying
just
that
don't know the
tens of
story.
thousands were not, Jacob. You're dancing around the reality. You're saying from 1493 to 1500, tens of thousands were not killed under Columbus in Hispaniola.
Because of Columbus or in spite of Columbus?
Under his watch were tens of thousands killed.
Because of him or in spite of him?
Because of Heinrich Himmler, or in spite of Heinrich Himmler?
Yeah, I mean, if people die, I mean, if you're trying to
Tens of
save people
thousands.
and a bunch of people get killed, like that's a very different thing
Okay.
than if people die because you ordered them killed.
Well, first, I think we can say he absolutely ordered some people killed. That's what the historical record.
Give me the specific
Even in his
example.
own. And if we're
Give me the specific.
Jacob, I read all the quotes earlier where you talked about subjugating and enslaving them, and then in that period you have tens of thousands of people dying, and you're saying, okay, no, you can't trust.
Well,
this
you
quote
gave
from
an
his-
example
I
of
don't know
the
what
you
quote
gave
you're
an
talking
example
about.
of the letter to the Queen that was found in 1880, and they've talked, and then Jacob
No,
counters.
that was
and
Michel
says,
de Cuento's quote. The other four quotes I gave were from
Which by the way, de
directly.
Cuneo's quote shows no involvement from Columbus of knowing what his friend was doing.
Okay,
no,
well,
'cause
well,
Cuno
hold on.
Said Columbus gave the woman to me. In
Okay,
the
so
quote,
guys,
Cuno said, the
we're-
Lord Admiral gave this trafficked woman to me.
You're right, probably because he trusted him.
So we're already
Not do
he-
those sorts of
he
things.
did.
we're already
No. Remember, Columbus explicitly in other cases was telling them not to do harm. So if he actually gave this girl to his charge, it's probably because he trusted his friend. Because it goes against all the other things that Columbus ever did when it came to women.
Really goes against all the other things he did, like the killing of 10,000.
Yeah, like when he
people.
released the girls that were given to him for sex, when he released the women that Penzone had taken, and he said, no, you need to give them back. When he gave explicit orders to the men that he left behind at his first
Yes,
voyage,
obviously you
he
don't want to-
explicitly told them, do not
Yes.
mess with the native women.
Obviously, you don't want to embarrass the crown by sending native sex trafficked girls back to Spain.
But why
True.
would he tell the men that he left behind not to harm the native women? And in fact, they all got killed because they did.
Ooh.
So you're saying to understand, you're saying the Cuno quote or Queno quote is he's making it up. It's fake.
No, I didn't say that.
Great to the Native American women, and to tens of
saying-
thousands of people did not die from 1493 to 1500.
No, I'm saying they died in spite of Columbus, not because of him.
Okay, so at best, he was just a terrible governor and should had no business being in charge of that colony. He
Oh,
couldn't-
believe me, he was trying. There was the rebellion I'm talking about was not the rebellion of the natives. It was the rebellion of
I
the
know.
Spaniards
Yes,
against
yes.
him because
So
he wouldn't let them do whatever they want. And in fact, he hung two of them. And that's why Bobadilla was so enraged when he showed up on the third voyage.
This just sounds like the journals of a man who can't take responsibility. Everyone around me is bad except me, and nothing's my fault. This guy is.
This sounds like you don't know the story.
Jacob, this is the Shane Baldwin of the 1500s. I'm sorry, dude. None of this is nonsense. No, like it's just like everyone else. It's Bobadilla. It's De La Casa. It's
Yeah, I know
Ronaldo.
the story, so I
Everyone
know the
except for the
context
guy
of all
I
of these.
like.
Okay,
Give
okay,
me a
guys.
break. His own journals say,
Guy-
I'm sending
okay.
slaves, the able-bodied. Let's beat them up. Let's have a good time. His own journals say that tens of thousands of people died, and we're jumping around like the
Which
second
quote?
time
Give
number
me
from
the
Mary
quote.
Well, okay,
Poppins
so hold on
to make
before.
this guy as if he's freaking Saint Peter.
Okay, quick. So Kwaku, chill. Okay, whoo! Holy smoke! All right, give me heart palpitations, guys. Okay, so look, we said we were gonna do this for an hour. We're already 13 minutes into overtime. Okay, so we got a buttload of people watching though, and a bunch of questions. How much time do you guys have? Do you want to go another 10 minutes?
I can go another 45 minutes.
Holy shiznit! Okay.
Well, 'cause we do need to revert into the actual how it results to the restored gospel. If not, we're just talking about.
Well, real quick, I would like to, Kwaku, and I want you to do this because I think it will help you and we can really resolve some of this. You've talked a lot about what Columbus said in his journal specifically. Okay. So what I would like to do is, what are the journal entries that we've talked about so far? Let's just review each one of them. We already went over Michel de Cuneo. What's the next one?
Okay, I'll give you each one I quoted here. Let me pull them up so I make sure I have the right dates.
Okay.
So
And I need to know the date so I can know what voyage it was part of, so I can get the context.
How many voyages did he have? Because when you said his fifth
4.
voyage, that was a trick question though, right? Because I was like, wait, there wasn't a fifth voyage, right?
Okay. So
I
this
got
first
you. See, I saw you, Jacob. I saw
No, I
you.
said 4 immediately.
Well, there was a time where you
Okay.
said, "Oh, I thought it
I
was
can
fifth."
give you, and I can give you an overview of each one if you'd like.
No, I don't.
Okay.
That's fine.
So, the first quote that I read, they are naturally timid and fearful. As soon, however, as they see that they are safe and have laid aside all fear, that sounds like real cannibals, naturally timid. They are very simple and honest and exceedingly liberal with all they have, none of them refusing anything he may possess when he is asked for it, but on the contrary, inviting us to ask them. They exhibit great love towards all others and preference to themselves. They also give objects of great value for trifles and content themselves with very little or nothing in return. This is him speaking about those cannibalistic natives. 14th
No,
of March,
actually, you're
1493.
incorrect. You're incorrect. This is from his first voyage, and he's actually talking about the peaceful natives that he began to interact with. So go ahead.
Oh, I thought they were all cannibals. Okay.
No, they weren't. He was great friends with Guacanagri and the peaceful tribes.
Oh, okay. So some of them were good.
Well,
And none of
he
the
was-
people that were good were killed or
Kwaku,
subjugated.
are you unaware of Kwaku's
was
relationship
rhetorical.
with Guacanagri and his tribe and the other peaceful tribes that he came
It was
across?
rhetorical. Those are rhetorical because now you're going to have to justify and you're going to have to come up.
Hold on, continue with the quote.
fact that
Continue
none
with
of
the
these
quote,
peaceful
though.
natives
I'm
were
just
killed.
giving the context. Continue with the quote.
Okay, these people are very simple in matters of war. As soon as as you will see from the 7 I have sent you, they could learn our language and then be returned. Unless you want me to bring more of them to Spain or keep them captive here, because with 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want. 14th of October, 1493.
Okay, let's talk about this. Actually, that is 1493. You said, what was that one?
Yeah, October 14th, 1493.
October. So this is during his second voyage. So here's what
This
happens.
is Columbus Day. Yeah.
So he comes back during the second voyage at this time, and they're beginning to realize that they might have military conflicts with other people. He was sending this letter to give the king and queen of Spain confidence that they couldn't be taken over by these natives, and that the natives, if they did rebel, that they would be able to maintain order with the small forces that he had. Okay, that's what he's saying. Second of all, I want to, just to give some context here, here is what he said. In his diary, he says, I have given the men, this is in his first voyage, December of 1492. He says, I have given the men orders everywhere to take care not to do the least thing to displease the natives and not to take anything from them against their will. So they have paid them for everything. One of the things that would happen is he didn't want them to try and take things from the natives, because the natives were very willing to trade to get the really, exotic Spanish goods. Carol Delaney says, quote, he sent men ashore giving instructions as usual that if the natives fled their approach, the men must not touch or take anything from their houses. So they go into these houses, the natives would run away. He told his men, don't take things from their houses. From the very beginning, Columbus notes how generously the natives shared whatever they had, and he didn't want his crew to take advantage of them. He demanded that there be an exchange, for example, beads and bells for needed food supplies. It was unequal to be sure, but trade nonetheless. He continually recounts having to restrain his crew from looting villages when the residents fled their approach. Throughout the diary, he repeats, quote, and this is Columbus himself, "I did not allow anything to be taken, not even the value of a pin."
Okay, so well, everything you're saying goes right along with what we established earlier, that you can't just let the Spaniards, especially as rebellions are beginning, to just do whatever they want. It completely disrupts the entire order of the colonization you're trying to create. But that doesn't discount or discredit the fact that he says, with 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want.
And if you know Spanish, as Carden does, you can use the word subjugate in a way in Spanish that basically means subdue, to try and quell a rebellion.
Si vamos a sujetar la rebelión. Eso.
Exactly. That's exactly right. You and I both know this. So
With
some of these
50
things
men,
come through
we
in
could-
translation. By the way, I know Spanish, so I've seen the translations that the academics have done with their, and believe me, they have done the most egregious translations of the original Spanish to try and make him sound as bad as possible.
Oh, the same
Okay,
woke
so-
scolds that
so-
wrote Las Venas Abiertas mistranslated Christopher Columbus to try and make him look like a
because
bad
all those
colonizer.
because all those natives didn't really die. It was all a mistranslation. Okay,
No.
so you could subdue them all. You could subdue them all, make them do whatever you want. Totally cool. And we know that
they were
went well because nobody
remember
died.
Kwaku, they're in a land that they're trying to peacefully take over power from, and he's writing back to the Kingdom of Spain saying, look, these guys don't have a lot, we don't need a giant army here. With 50 men we can
Peacefully
take care of
take
business.
over, Jacob. Peacefully. You don't send ships with cannons and guns if you're trying to do a mission trip. I feel you are going into this trying to make him as good as possible. There is no vesselage or colonization that is peaceful. That's never happened.
Let's say
ever.
you have a tribe that enslaves women, enslaves black people, murders babies, sacrifices them to their gods, and they're doing that in Kansas, and they're their own independent thing. And we went in and said, you know what, we're going to take over and stop the enslavement of, I mean, this is like the Southern argument. Like, just leave the people alone. Why are the Northern troops going into the South and not letting them keep their slaves?
Okay, here, can I give you the pushback I have to that? Here's the pushback I have to what you're thinking.
That's a good one. That's a good one, though, Kwaku. That's an uphill battle, bro.
It is good, but it relies wholly on the testimony of the people that are on trial. So we have the world as a witness to the Southern problem. But when the repeated answer every single time we're doubting or investigating the European colonialism into the New World, every single time they're cannibals.
Okay, hold on.
Sound like a political lie and starts to sound like propaganda.
We don't have to, I don't have to, it can't sound like propaganda, or we can read the actual diary entries, contemporaneous, from the people who were there, who described what they saw when they arrived. So the doctor on the second voyage who was with them wrote this in his journal, quote, "Certain captains set out in the morning, and some of them returned at dinner time, bringing a boy of about 14, who later told us he was one of these Carib captives. The other captains went in various directions. A few men returned with a boy who a man had been leading by the hand and had abandoned at their approach. Only these few were detached to bring them back, and the rest remaining behind. These Caribs, he's talking about, captured some women from the island and also brought back other women who were prisoners of the Caribs and came of their own accord. These people, the Caribs, raid the other islands and carry off all the women they can take, especially the young and beautiful, whom they keep as servants and concubines. They had carried away so many in 50 houses, we found no males, more than 20 of the captive girls." So Columbus and his men are freeing these women who have been captured by Caribs, by the Caribs. These women
no
say
one's
that they
making
were
the
treated
argument
with
that the New
cruelty
World
that
was
seems
sinless.
incredible. Hold on. The Caribs eat the male children that they have by the women that they take, and only bring up the children of their own women. As for the men they're able to capture, they bring those who are alive home to be slaughtered. Flesh was left on them, except that was too rough to be eaten.
This
We found the
literally
neck
sounds
of a
like
man cooking
this
in a
sounds like
pot.
the Indian
They
version of
castrate the
Protocols of the Elders
boys
of
they
Zion.
capture and use them as servants until they are men.
Okay, wait, but hold on a second though.
This is the Indian version of Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Every single colonist wanted a reason to justify what they were doing, but when I'm reading Columbus's own words about how peaceful
Wait, but
many
hold on,
were,
Kwaku.
then now we have an issue.
You do realize
Because
Columbus.
you're
You do
painting a
realize.
picture
Hold on.
that
You
everyone is
realize
cannibalistic,
Columbus.
and then we get into it. Well, some of them actually weren't and actually worked with him. Well, which one is it? Because both were dying.
No. You don't understand. Columbus himself was allied with the group that was fighting against the Caribs who were trying to kill and eat them. Wakanagri and Columbus were great friends, and their common enemy were the Caribs who were eating people that Columbus, when those Caribs would attack, he would then, any of the prisoners, they would send back to Spain.
So Kwaku, I want to boil this down to a simple question though. Is that, okay, I'm with you on the side that, you don't show up with a gunboat, unless you want to call it gunboat diplomacy, and say, hey, don't fight back the colonization or else you're going to be a prisoner of war, right? So I'm with you on that, all right? But at the same token, if you're saying my rubric is not presentist, it's biblical, that the book of Exodus has long decried slavery, so down with the human traffickers, and I think, that's the rubric I'm using. If what's his name, Jacob? Wakanagri. If Wakanagri's documentation and primary sources is correct, that the Caribs were enslaving them, eating the male children, only raising their own males, they're guilty of a worse human trafficking crime, which would then turn Christopher Columbus into the liberator of the Wakanagri tribe, which according to your rubric of anti-human trafficking would then make him the Christian hero, right?
If the South was engaging in cannibalism against blacks, would you have been okay with the North invading the South and colonizing them?
Okay.
Or does your standard only apply to, it doesn't apply to native people who are being cannibalized?
Oh, stop that, Jacob. Come on.
Here's the problem, though. The problem is we're making the assumption that all of the records you're quoting, there's no propaganda. This is why I said this sounds like the Indian version of Protocols of the Elders of Zion.
But that's what I said about you can't accuse them of doublespeak, and then whenever you don't want to believe a primary source, you say, it's just propaganda.
Remember what I said earlier. I already conceded that many of these people were cannibals, and also I've conceded that the New World was not sinless. I'm not coming from that perspective of, these were everything peaceful.
Okay.
I'm saying you can have multiple evil people in one scenario, and Columbus had innocent people killed. Columbus was subjugating people.
Can you give me this? But you say that, but I want the specific.
Jacob, when I do that, you go, well, the encomienda system didn't happen. They were all just playing Chuck E. Cheese.
But I'm asking, but the encomienda system is not a death sentence.
It's gobbledygook. It's nonsense.
The encomienda system is a system of governance. It's not a death sentence.
It's a system of governance that worked people to death. Great. The freaking camps.
No, the encomienda system. Just so you know, the encomienda system was in Spain. Spanish vassals lived under the encomienda system. It's a system of vassalage and underlordage.
You're saying that wait, pause. You know for a friggin' fact that they were more cruel and more harsh to the natives under this system than they were to the people in Spain.
Okay,
just
that's fair.
The same word of governance doesn't mean it was the same level of practice.
I'm saying the encomienda system is not itself. It doesn't have to be a death sentence.
You're making this is a fallacy. You're claiming that because they're under that same phrase of governance that they had to be the exact same actions. That's totally not true. That's totally fallacious.
No, and Columbus didn't want it to be. He envisioned it
then
being
why
like it
did he
was
write it in his journals? He was okay with taking slaves, and why under his governance?
Which quote?
To 1500,
show me the quote where his intention was long-term slavery and not Christian conversion.
Yeah, I think that's nonsense. Tens of thousands of people have died, and if you're going to say that those tens of thousands were all cannibals, then we're living in different realities.
Kwaku, if the people in the New World were being enslaved by one another, and by bringing Christianity that could set them free, would you be okay with them bringing Christianity and freeing the slaves in the New World?
Hey, guess what, Jacob? It didn't work. The
That's not what I
genocide
asked,
committee,
though.
they all died.
That's
No,
not
no,
that's not what I
I'm not.
asked. I know, but
I'm not.
Columbus's
No, no. But we don't.
intention
Here's the thing, though. We don't have to play
Columbus's
the.
intention was to bring Christianity to the New World so that all people could be made free because a Christian could not be enslaved.
Jacob, we don't have to play hypotheticals because it already happened. We know what happened.
Despite, you're right. I know what
if,
happened.
if my
And it
marriage,
happened
your intentions don't really matter.
In spite of Christopher Columbus,
Jacob,
not
we're not here
because
debating
of him.
Jacob, we're not here debating the intentions of Columbus. We're debating if the legacy of him being a Christian hero is deserved.
No, we're evaluating if he was good or bad, a good or bad person. And Columbus was indeed a good person who had good intentions. And the problem was that the people under his command wouldn't follow his command, and then they rebelled against him.
Okay, well, first, we this is Ward Radio. It's a Mormon show, so we are discussing it whether he's a Christian hero. And second, we haven't even laid the groundwork for what makes a good person. Because if we're being consistent, there's nobody good, right? So if we're being consistent here,
fair enough. If that's
we didn't really establish the grounds here.
Christopher Columbus was not a good person in the sight of God because the only person who's good is God. Fine, I'll grant you that.
Okay, but yeah, so we didn't really establish the ground rules here of what we're kind of just having a free for all riff. But I really do think we need to we need
Okay,
to
go where you want to go because we're gonna wrap up here pretty soon.
Well, this whole debate is pointless unless we're bringing in the restored gospel. That's why.
So hit it. So bring it in, baby.
Okay,
bring it in.
So first, what is the quote that we reference from Nephi? Does anyone have it up?
No, but I can. I can use scripture notes to get it up. You know what I'm saying? Keep going.
Okay, so let me pull up, let's make sure we're reading the
Actually, before you do that, I just want to make a quick point while you look this up. Okay.
Okay.
So Christopher Columbus, Quaker, do you know what his ultimate goal was when it came to getting the gold and finding the Great Khan of Asia? Do you know what that was in his journals, or what he said to the Queen about that?
I don't think it really matters because we know what he did.
So let me lay it out.
I don't think if your intentions to be a faithful spouse don't matter if you cheat on your wife.
Let me
Your
let
vows
me
are
explain.
nonsense. They don't matter.
So this is what happened. Christopher Columbus's entire worldview and voyage was basically to save the world from the Muslims and to kind of make Christianity great again after years of conquest. So what he did, remember, when he was a young man, Constantinople had fallen to the Muslims, and that was you can't even imagine how big of a deal that was. He wanted to go to the east because he had heard that Marco Polo had found large, vast treasures. He wanted to get money from the east and make an alliance with the Great Khan of Asia so that Spain could lead a crusade to Jerusalem in order to retake Jerusalem so they could rebuild the temple so that they could prepare the world for the second coming of Jesus Christ.
Whoa, that's based. Jeez.
That is literally what it was. Carol Delaney lays this
Jacob.
out explicitly in all of his private writings. Columbus's entire premise of his work was to save the world and to prepare it for the second coming of Jesus by reestablishing the building of a temple in Jerusalem for the second coming of Jesus Christ.
Jacob, and Tim Ballard thought he was saving all the children by sleeping with his past life wives. That was Elizabeth Adams. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. You can be a complete lunatic and sociopath and have delusions of grandeur. In fact, it goes along pretty well with what I'm saying, that he was a violent con artist with delusions of grandeur. Okay, so yeah.
He also became a lay brother in the Franciscan order, I believe.
Yeah, and Shane Baldwin was appeared to by Joseph Smith while he was driving down the freeway in the middle of Kentucky. Okay. First Nephi 13:12. Let's get to.
Okay. First Nephi 13:12. Okay, go for it.
Actually, let's go from verse 10. And it came to pass, I looked and beheld many waters, and they divided the Gentiles from the seed of my brethren. This is important. And it came to pass that the angel said unto me, Behold, the wrath of God is upon the seed of thy brethren. And I looked and beheld a man among the Gentiles, who is separated from the seed of my brethren by the many waters. And I beheld the Spirit of God, that it came down and wrought upon the man, and he went forth upon the many waters, even unto the seed of my brethren who were in the promised land. And it came to pass that I beheld the Spirit of God, that it wrought upon the other Gentiles, and that they went forth out of the captivity upon the many waters. And it came to pass that I beheld many multitudes of the Gentiles upon the land of promise. And I beheld the wrath of God, that it was upon the seed of my brethren, and they were scattered before the Gentiles and were smitten. And I beheld the Spirit of the Lord, that it was upon the land of the Gentiles, and they did prosper and obtain the land for their inheritance. And I beheld that they were white and exceedingly fair and beautiful, like unto my people before they were slain. So that's the quote here, okay? So we have to make the argument that Cristobal Colon is the only person this could be about.
No, I would say we need to make the case that it's the most likely person that this is about.
Okay, so first, would a formidable and important leader of an apostate gospel be listed here?
There were lots of good people that the Spirit worked upon during the Great Apostasy.
Yeah, I mean, Joan of Arc is one, right? But I mean, you read,
and Martin Luther.
Joan of Arc,
the Spirit acted on Martin Luther to start the Reformation, I would say, and Martin Luther had a lot of issues, believe me.
I would say
the Lord. Are you not saying the Lord works with imperfect people?
I see what you're doing. Not gonna work. I am saying that I don't think Martin Luther was one of those people. I don't think Martin Luther.
He's just as good as you at that little underhanded thing, man. It's like watching two little chefs trying out cook each other on one of those cooking shows. You know,
no,
right?
I would say 2 Nephi 29 actually condemns Martin Luther because it does two things. It links anti-Semitism to sola scriptura, which Martin Luther, big champion and purveyor of sola scriptura. And
I got no problem throwing some shade at Martin Luther.
But I would say Christopher Columbus believed in the triune God. He believed in that same Trinity that Jesus Christ and Heavenly Father came to Joseph to say, not true, isn't real, nonsense. So in the name of the triune God and for an incredibly abominable church, you're saying this is the guy that Nephi saw. I don't think it makes any sense. I don't think it checks out.
Or see, I was thinking you were going to go in a different direction. I was thinking that you were going to go, and it came to pass that I beheld the Spirit of God, that it wrought upon other Gentiles, and they went forth out of captivity upon the many waters. And I thought you were going to say, see, it happened to other ones, not him, not Christopher Columbus. See, I thought you were going to try and do that.
Here's an interesting fact. Did you know they just a breaking finding apparently that they exhumed his bones recently, did a DNA test, and guess what they found out? Apparently, he's of Jewish ancestry. Now, notice what it says in the verse. It doesn't say a Gentile. It says a man among the Gentiles. Which I'm not saying, but
you are saying. I'm not saying, but I am saying. I love it when people say that. Well, I'm not saying what I just said, but it sounds a lot like what I want to say.
Jacob, that I can't even make the joke I was gonna make. It'll cause too much of a firestorm. I won't even say. I won't even go there. Okay, but I do think it's worth this question. Would someone who is really purveying the great apostasy, someone who would be chosen for this, and would the Lord choose someone who wouldn't really get the job?
Would he have chosen Martin Luther? Would he have chosen Martin Luther to begin the Reformation that broke the stranglehold of the Catholic Church on the world?
Well,
a rabid anti-Semite who continued to hold all the abominable creeds? Like, let's not pretend that the Spirit can't work with people that are imperfect.
Yeah, but that's moving the goalposts. We're talking about someone First Nephi 13 is describing someone in a very beautiful, uplifting way.
Yeah, I would say if you learn about his story, compared to the other guys, he was pretty uplifting and beautiful.
Yeah, it is. Compared to the other guys. Yeah, compared to Ghislaine Maxwell, Kevin Spacey wasn't that bad. He was still bad. So we no more relativism. But then let's think about it. King Darius. God worked through King Darius in the Old Testament. King Darius was a piece of garbage. King Darius was very, very bad, right?
And how is that helping your case?
No, because First Nephi 13 isn't describing well, I beheld that everyone was a piece of crap, but this one was a little less crappy. And then the Lord said, all right, you're going to work for the time now. No, 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 that's not what it's describing. It's this is saying this is a chosen, phenomenal person here that the Lord is working through.
I don't see that in the text. I don't think the text necessitates that interpretation.
I don't think the text necessitates that interpretation. Ooh, I feel so refined.
Wait,
just
wait,
right now after having heard that. Wow.
Sorry, I realize I've got to debate this way with Jacob. Jacob, the data do not suggest. Okay.
Hey, don't worry about it. I'm not. My thing with Dan McClellan isn't data over dogma. I think that's a great thing to do. I just think Dan always puts his dogma over the data.
Ah, savage. Okay, so I put in a plug for some super chats really fast? 30 seconds each. 30 seconds each, and then I got to get to some super chats.
No, I don't have anything. Go ahead and go to the super chats.
Okay, cool, sick. So, anyway, we're gonna go to this. Unfortunately, I X'd out of the. What's it called? I X'd out of the tab on accident.
The super chats.
So anyway, here we go.
I do want to make one request, Carden.
Okay, hit it.
When we do get to the end of this, that we each get
a minute.
Kwaku the final word, but that we get a little 2-minute closing statement.
No, I got you. Look, I know that you're addicted to the formal debate, bro. And even if we're just having a discussion, you got to slip a little, formality in there. It's, you dating your wife must have been hilarious. You know what I'm saying? Just be like, I know we're not engaged in the official parameters of first, second, third, fourth, and fifth date expectations socially. But if at the end of our sixth date, we could meet each other's parents, I would find that generally a little bit more amicable, wouldn't you? That must have been hilarious. So, okay, here we go with the super chats. Thank you very much. Fidget the Crazy. She said, this is painful back when you guys were fighting, but now it's less painful. Stephen Diamond says, Christopher Columbus didn't have temple rocks. I think that has to be brought up here, just like you, Carden, unless you come get one. Yes, we're going to get the temple rocks, Stephen Diamond. Thank you again for the super chat. Andy Young says, Nephi saw Leif Erikson. Yinga Dingsdergen or something. I don't know who that is. But he says Nephi saw Leif Erikson. That's a new one on me. Never heard that one.
Yeah, I'm sure Leif Erikson was a Viking, you guys. You don't think he wasn't involved in pillaging?
Oh, that's just Viking-esque.
I don't think Leif Erikson is anti-Scandinavian. Going to be better than Columbus, guys, if you look into the details. So James King. Vikings, guys, Vikings.
James King says, Jacob won the end, LOL. Man, they were hating on you before. Now they're saying that you won. And then we've got a really interesting question here from our boys on Twitter. All right. I'm going to have to get back to that one, though. So just keep going. I'm going to have to pull it up on Twitter. Go. Kwaku, you got the floor, bro.
Oh,
are we already getting to the closing statements, or what are we doing here?
Oh, no. I just interrupted what you guys were saying to get to some super chats. And so
let me do something. Let me make one point real quick. I'm going to be posting on my blog or on my website. There's a blog there. It's going to be called "Was Columbus a Monster? Stories You Were Not Told About Him." And in this, I go voyage by voyage, and I give the quotes from the journals and from the authors that are going to paint a picture of Columbus, that these are just the facts of the history. When you look at what he actually did, there's a reason that Kwaku can't find a specific instance where Columbus sentenced a native to death, because it doesn't exist. In fact, on the second voyage, and I'll let you get to that and give me the specific in a minute. On the second voyage, there was 2 natives who were brought to him by Ojeda. Ojeda was one of his commanders who he sent out to go get gold and keep the peace. And when he did, Ojeda brought back this native who had stolen some clothes. And then Ojeda ended up doing some terrible things to this person. So he brings him to Columbus. Columbus sentences him to death. And everyone's like, oh, Columbus sentenced this native to death. But when you actually read the full story, what Columbus did was he sentenced him to death, this chief, for stealing the clothes of a Spaniard. And then you know what Columbus did? As soon as the guy said, I'm sorry, he forgave him. And he said, you're fine, just don't do it again. In other words, Columbus was bluffing. So the only time you have an instance where he might have sentenced a native to death for something trivial, he didn't. And if you look at the context, it's very clear that he used it as a show of force to the natives to say, hey, don't mess with me. I don't mess around here. Because he was also worried about his people getting killed in a large-scale native rebellion because they were a fairly small force.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
interesting
see,
story.
I just think what you have rose-colored glasses. You're refusing to acknowledge the tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands that were killed under his governorship from 1493 to 1500.
Because of him or in spite of him?
If you think not, if you, okay, Jacob,
Then
if
you're
you're
going to
willing
have to give
look,
me the specifics where it happened because of Columbus.
Jacob, he was the governor of the colony. He is the man in charge.
You're right. And did you know
So
that
either
there was
he's
a rebellion amongst the Spaniards against him because
for
he
7 years?
wouldn't let them do whatever they want?
For
Yes.
7 years.
Yes.
Okay, so
The
all right,
entire
so
second voyage, go read the story. You just don't know the story.
Jacob, I know the story. The problem is
Well, then give me an outline of
it's
the second
nonsense
voyage.
because you're saying for a 7 year period, all these people who died. So at worst, he was a bloodthirsty murderer, and at best, he was an incompetent leader who just
You
really wanted everybody
you
to
can
leave.
make the incompetent leader, but the problem is if you're leading a group of people that want to go and rape, pillage, and adventure, which is exactly what the 1,000 Spaniards that came with him on the second voyage were all about, go read the history. It's literally all about him writing to the king and queen of Spain saying, these guys are out of control. I can't control these people. And now the natives are pissed off and they're mad at me because I'm trying to stop them. And that was the whole drama of the second and third voyages. Eventually, now here's what happened. Just a point to your credit. When he got sent back in chains by Bobadilla at the end of the third voyage, he gets to Spain and the Spanish monarchs look at him and they go, you got screwed over. But they also said, we can't have Columbus we're going to restore you your things, but we're not going to make you the governor again because the people there don't support you. They're fighting against you. And so we're going to send you back on a fourth voyage to do exploration, which is what he did best, but not to govern the colony anymore.
Okay, so this wonderful Western Christian hero was not good at being a governor of this colony.
No, well, I would say that no one could govern those Spaniards who were intent on adventuring and doing horrible
My friend,
things.
don't make me get my friend involved. He's crazy. That's like what the mafiosos say. They're like, yo, poor shopkeeper. You see my friend Bugsy Malone over there? You see what he does to the other shopkeepers if they don't pay? I'm the only thing standing between you and me. Like,
but don't you think it's just so telling that it's Columbus versus everyone? It's okay.
No,
yes.
It wasn't. There was a contingent of followers of Columbus who stayed loyal to him. And in fact, when he went on his fourth voyage, he hand selected that group to go with him. And the fourth voyage is the most incredible story ever. They get marooned on Jamaica for a year. And anyway, there's all this cool stuff.
It seems to me the more likely scenario is that all the natives and the Spaniards weren't just hell-bent on
no,
making
not all the natives. Guacanagri and his
sucked
tribe
too.
were great friends with Columbus. In fact, most of the tribes that encountered Columbus were actually very friendly with him, and he did trade and work with them. In fact, did you know that Columbus adopted as his godson one of the natives, Diego, and that brought Diego into his household, and Diego would go with Columbus on future voyages as an interpreter and a diplomat to other tribes?
I absolutely know that. Andrew Jackson adopted a Native American child as well, and he still gave us a Trail of Tears, so it doesn't really mean much.
I know, but you're conflating the two. You don't know the story of Christopher Columbus and what happened with his godson Diego.
Your story of Christopher Columbus is highlighting the few nice moments while ignoring the fact that under his terrible leadership as governor, hundreds of thousands perished.
In spite of him or because of him?
Both.
Okay.
Well, both.
Let's say both.
Well, if you say
then
both,
give me the specific instance where a native was killed because of Christopher Columbus. What's funny is I can give you one. I actually have something I could give you because there was a big mistake that Columbus did make. I'll grant that. Do you want me to tell that story?
There were 70,000 big mistakes he made.
Well, let me give you one. Let me give you some help here, Kwaku. I'll give you the best example against Christopher Columbus, the biggest mistake that he ever made, in my opinion. During the second voyage, a full-blown war broke out. While he was away exploring southern Cuba, he came back. And when he came back, he had found out that one of the Spanish who were with him had gone out, and his name was Marguerite. And Marguerite had gone out and just wreaked havoc on the native tribes. The natives were all super pissed. When Columbus came back. He was almost dead because he was super sick. But there was basically a brewing, a full-blown war against the Spaniards on the island. The war eventually breaks out. The Spanish win. Following the end of this big battle with the natives, where they win the battle against the natives who wanted to kill the Spaniards and drive them out, in typical feudal fashion, Columbus implemented a tribute system, basically a tax on the people. This is very typical of what you do when you in the feudal age. And he made a bad mistake. He was fairly new to the New World, and he assumed that there was gold all over because some of the natives had gold around their necks. And what he did was he demanded that the natives every 3 months produce basically like a table or like a teaspoon of gold, essentially, was what they had to produce. Well, that was way too much. And the problem is the natives ended up going out and like trying to find gold like crazy, and they neglected their harvest and their fields. And so they had a bad harvest and a famine broke out and a lot of natives died. Now, horrible decision, bad thing all the way around. Horrible decision by Columbus. He made a mistake in thinking there was more gold than there was. But guess what he did as soon as they weren't able to bring in the gold? He changed it. He cut the tribute that they would have to produce in half. And he said, if you can't find gold, then just produce cotton, like spin like these cotton things. If you bring that, that'll count as the tribute tax instead of gold. And so that was what they did. So he realized his mistake and he corrected it. So that's your best, I think, if you want to look for a big mistake that Columbus made. But again, I don't look at it as he was trying to sentence people to, death and all this. It was a dumb administrative move that he made based on ignorance in the feudal context that he lived in.
So telling the people you conquered to show up. So telling the people
as bad. It's not as bad as the 500 Arawak that he killed under his order.
Wait, which ones were those? What voyage was that on?
Oh boy, we've gone so far into this debate. I couldn't tell you.
Well, no, I want to know the specifics of the 500. I want to know when that happened so I can check it make sure I include it in my history.
Just go look it up. I couldn't.
I would imagine you're probably talking about the 500 who were killed in the second voyage, while during the war that broke out with the natives. That was the largest sort of conflict that happened when the natives came in a full-blown attack against the Spaniards and they fought a big battle.
No, I believe the 500 Arawak were not soldiers, but they were people that were being enslaved and subjugated.
I just want to know the specifics, though. You've made a claim. I just want you to back it up.
Okay, let me take 20 seconds here.
Okay, well, I got some super chats while you're taking your 20 seconds really fast, okay? The Archer says, the Spirit tells me Jacob won, but yet the Spirit doesn't work through a highly imperfect man like me. We see what you did there, Todd. You're funny. Then Matt Rabb says, Columbus has been one of 5 men ordained to the office of high priest by proxy in the temple by Woodruff, so I'd say that says something about his character. Yeah, dude, what's your beef with that, Quake? Was Wilford Woodruff wrong? By the way, we need to bring what would Wilford Woodruff do? Because then it would just be like quadruple WD,
you
know?
Well,
what would WW Phelps do?
Guys, I've been completely consistent. We did a whole episode of Ward Radio where I said I thought Wilford Woodruff was out of his mind. I mean,
those eyes. It's the eyes in the daguerreotype.
Yeah, Wilford Woodruff had so many visions and revelations that the church acknowledges but doesn't consider doctrine or canon.
With eyes like those, I can believe it.
Yeah,
no. Wilford Woodruff,
or maybe he just had vision issues. I don't know.
No, let me be clear. I don't think the people are gonna lose their minds, and I already know Kelsey's comments is just. Okay,
come on, be nice, man. Be nice.
I will say this. I don't think the St. George vision of the founding father. It just seems. To me, it doesn't.
Because you don't like it. That's why. Because you don't like it.
No, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't seem to jive with anything else in biblical history. Like, okay, angels appearing to you, all right, but one day it was in the temple.
Well, come on. On the Mount, Jesus Christ with the apostles saw Moses, and there was, the great ascension, the great patriarchs came back.
Because that was prophesied by Moses and Elijah. I mean, that was prophesied by Malachi.
Well, if you believe the Book of Mormon, that a great land and a blessed land will be raised for this seed, then that would make scriptural sense.
Do I believe that a man who had incredible trauma and was consistently seeing ghosts was in the temple, and George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, all these people appeared to him and said, "Get baptized"?
Believers arguing like atheists, bro. Believers
I'm
arguing
not.
like atheists. No.
No. I'm not arguing like an atheist.
Well, Wilford Woodruff was a racist, so I guess that we got to throw him under the bus too, right?
Was he really?
We can't have the president's standards.
I don't, dude. I don't
We
care
gotta
about
be.
that.
We got to
I
throw
don't
all
care
of them
about
under the
that.
bus. Brigham Young, Wilford Woodruff, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, I got super chats.
Okay,
I got
wait,
super
actually,
chats.
pause.
Can't grant him any
Wait.
slack.
I want to dissect this real quick. I want to dissect this.
Okay.
Brigham Young didn't do what Wilford Woodruff did. Brigham Young had dreams, but he never placed them as revelation because he knew he really couldn't trust some of his own senses there. Wilford Woodruff reported everything he had as revelation. That's
Like
why,
a based Chad with some self-confidence.
guys, the Sunset Arizona revelation
Got
by
some
Wilford Woodruff.
stones.
Yeah, the Sunset Arizona revelation by Wilford Woodruff, where Jesus tells him, "I'm going to destroy the United States because everybody's wicked," was published by the church, and now it's no longer part of the canon because we realize maybe Wilford Woodruff's visions were for him and not for us. And I think the founding father vision is just it doesn't seem to match the smell test of the other ones. It doesn't seem to make any sense. It seems too bizarre. I think he had a lot of trauma. He was always in this world and in the spirit world. I think we can take Wilford Woodruff's revelations and say maybe they were just for him, and we can't be certain. George Washington and Thomas Jefferson literally appeared in the St. George Temple and said, "Make me a high priest."
Okay. Well, maybe they didn't say make me a high priest. Maybe it was just being generous and overachieving. So hold on.
That's the claim. No, Cardin, that's the claim.
Sure. I'm going to finish with the super chats. Because right now I don't have Thomas Jefferson demanding that I do his temple work. I got super chatters, you know what I'm saying, making some comments, and I want to catch up with it. So Fidget the Crazy says, just to be an absolute brat, here's something to stir the pot. Oh, great, Fidget. What's she gonna say? In the show topics forum, Cindy Puckett posted this about Columbus. Okay, it's not so bad. Good. She said DNA evidence confirms that Columbus was in fact a Sephardic Jew. Yes, interesting. We spoke about that. Thank you, Fidget. Andy Young says Christopher Columbus founded Ohio. Unacceptable. And then Scott Nelson says, Kwaku, put your point of everyone against Columbus, but a few against what we know about with Joseph Smith. Wait, hold on. Kwaku, put your point of everyone against Columbus, but a few against what we know with Joseph Smith. I don't know exactly what you're saying, Scott. Please try and repeat that. And James King says, Wilford Woodruff was a prophet of God. End of story. Rock on. So look, dudes, we've got like 3 to 5 minutes left tops. All right. Got a lot of people on Elon's platform that have retweeted this with all kinds of comments. Some of the best ones here that I'm just going to read really fast are the following. And let me tell you, this one is actually pretty funny, Kwaku. I think you're going to like it a lot. Okay. So, in the comments, we've got a bunch of retweets here, but somebody said, actually, I won't put it out because it wasn't a super chat. It said, I've only seen Kwaku's drama on X, but this is pretty wild. He just earned a follow. So, okay, you just earned a follow from this stream. All right. And then a couple others say, go get 'em, boys, rooting for both of you. So I don't know if that's both sidisms or what, you know what I'm saying? But go get 'em, boys, they say. So anyway, all right. So do we want to do final statements? Final statements, because we're 2 hours into this, guys. We're 2 hours into this.
Kwaku, do you want me to give you the final word, Kwaku?
I'll make mine really quick.
Okay.
Okay. My belief here is consistent. I don't believe Jesus really wants us to venerate people who should be venerated. I believe if you break what's outlined in the Old Testament, especially the book of Exodus, in regard to discovering new lands, you shouldn't be held up as a Christian hero. Did Columbus do some things that were important to establish the Western world? Yes, but I don't believe he's a Christian hero. And I'm not going to teach my kids he was a Christian hero. And I think there's nothing wrong with natives wanting to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day. And I think there's nothing wrong with people saying, I'm going to think that first Nifa guy was I almost said Leif Garrett. That's the Australian country singer. Was Leif Erikson. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the end of the day, what the Book of Mormon tells us to do, and what the New Testament tells us to do, what Jesus Christ tells us to do, will eventually lead you to live a life that's pretty much not like anything Christopher Columbus did. And so that's the message. Doesn't really matter that much. There's nothing in the baptismal or temple recommend interviews that say you have to like Columbus. none of this really matters. But Jesus Christ is the way. Read the four Gospels. Read the Book of Alma. Everything's good. That's really my end message.
All right. So one last super chat, and then you get your final word there. Jacob Thuggy
Sounds
says
good.
Wilford Woodruff wore blue, black, and white photos make them look crazy. Okay, I think he's mentioning that his eyes look nuts in the old daguerreotypes. And Scott Nelson just slipped a last super chat in there and said Kwaku made the point that Columbus must have been bad due to the fact of rebellion and surrounding people not liking him. If we apply that same logic to Joseph Smith, what do we get? Ooh. Rough, my man.
You get the greatest American who's ever lived.
All right, rock on. All right. So Jacob, final thoughts, my man. Final thoughts.
All right, my final thoughts. So first of all, this to me it has nothing to do with being a Latter-day Saint. This is a matter of history and an analysis of what actually happened in the story of Christopher Columbus. And what Kwaku has done and what a lot of people do is they know the quotes that people bring up. And these quotes, if you don't understand the full context of what's going on, or you throw out the numbers of people that died, you don't understand the story. Okay. I have laid out the story on my channel, Thoughtful Faith. Look it up. I just released the videos again today. I release them every year on Columbus Day because I think people need to know the story. If you don't know what happened on Columbus's first voyage or his second voyage or his third voyage or his fourth voyage, you simply are missing the context of these quotes and the things that are going on. You need to, like, when you listen, if you listen to what I put out there, what you're going to hear is the story with all of the dirty details in there. I haven't like left something out. Okay. That's why I wanted Kwaku to get specific, because I wanted to see if there was something that I missed, but I don't think there was anything that I missed. And so I want people to go do that. And if you want to just do something real quick, go to thoughtful-faith.com. I actually just posted it. It's called Was Columbus a Monster? Stories You Were Not Told. And you guys can go read all of these things that when you read all of these quotes, you realize when you take the quotes that I've provided over here in this blog entry on my website, and you listen to the full story of Christopher Columbus, you understand what's going on here. And when you understand that, you can realize that Columbus was indeed a man of his time, but you also have to remember this. Columbus was intent on converting the natives to Christianity, all of them, every one of them, so that they couldn't be slaves. All right? These were people who lived in lands where there was slavery, cannibalism, all of that. If somebody wants to say that it's justified to, let's say, colonize the southern states who wanted to leave the United States because they had slavery, I think you could almost make a case that Christians going into lands engaging in slavery and cannibalism could have a justified case to want to maybe do that. I don't know. That's a debate that people can have. But the reality is, if we provide a presentist lens, and I'll give this to Kwaku, is consistent. He rejects George Washington. He rejects all sorts of people in history as any sort of a hero because of their views that they had. I judge people based on the context that they're in and if they made an improvement. Columbus was part of a burgeoning movement in the Western world to begin to universalize humanity because of his Christianity. And that is it.
90% of academics hate Columbus because he sucked. Oh, or maybe because they're wrong and they try and review history on
what
everything.
What percentage, Kwaku, of historians are left-wing academics in the history department? Did you know in the history department?
Hey, you say this about COVID. You say this about COVID, Kwaku.
Do you want to know what the ratio is in the history department? It is 33-1 Democrat to Republican registered.
Yeah, I wonder why.
Yeah, because leftists took over the history department and people like Howard Zinn. By the way, I just want to throw this in there as part of my last final statement, I swear. Howard Zinn should be run out of academia. Everything about him should be stripped down and thrown in the trash.
Who's Howard Zinn?
He's the guy who wrote A People's History of the United States. He's one of the biggest
that's garbage.
influences on academic history forever. his treatment of Christopher Columbus, once you learn the real story, is so egregiously bad that he should never be taken seriously as a historian again for the outright, utter nonsense that was not cited, that isn't backed up in any serious way by the actual firsthand historical documents. It's insane. It's a travesty. And anyone who cites him without being totally ironic just is abysmally uninformed as to the facts of the life of Christopher Columbus, even from the people who don't like him, who are serious historians. That man is a pure propagandist. And by the way, most academic historians are propagandists because of that system.
Look, you had me right before that last part. One, I think you're fighting a losing battle. Columbus is a bad name now. Okay, among a lot of people.
But that's an appeal to authority, which is a logical fallacy.
I fully understand.
Joseph Smith is a bad name amongst most people.
Oh,
I don't think so. I think, hey, look.
Oh, no, I think so.
Joseph Smith. Hey, in India, they have that giant golden statue.
But India's not those academics, bro. If you were to poll those academics that you just cited on your little phone,
Joseph Smith's name has much more respect.
Hey, that was a good one. Hey, that was a good one. You got to give the devil his due.
No, it doesn't.
You got to give the devil his due.
Columbus is far more respected historically amongst people in the world than Joseph Smith.
I would disagree, but maybe you're right. Point is, though,
okay.
I do think you do yourself a disfavor when you say
a disservice.
A disservice. All these academics are just because they're left leaning. They're terrible. I mean,
I'll grant it. I went a little overboard there. I actually have a lot of.
I didn't. I think they're full of crap, and academia has fallen.
But not for Howard Zinn. None for Howard Zinn. That man is a Marxist psychopath propagandist, and anyone who doesn't, who quotes him unironically, just alone for what he did with Christopher Columbus, to show that you are that incapable of basic research on Christopher Columbus, while you're an academic historian publishing a book, it's obvious you're just a fraudulent liar.
Oh, brutal.
So,
okay,
Howard Zinn, I have no respect for you. Go to hell.
Okay, so
I don't know who Howard Zinn is, but guys, I gotta go.
No, hold on. I'm wrapping it up here. I'm just wrapping it up. Last two super chats, and then we're leaving. All right. So, last super chat is level 9 saying disbelieving revelations by the prophet himself leads us nowhere good, man. What else are you willing to throw out if?
Oh, shut up. Do you believe in Adam God? No, shut up. All these people are, well, you disagree with this one thing. Shut up. If you want to be a weird lapdog and a bootlicker, you can be, but it makes you creepy and your kids are going to leave the church if you raise them that way. Shut up.
Okay. All right. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to go take my ulcer medication now, all right? Because, holy smoke, I feel like I've got heart palpitations. For any of you guys that are wondering, we're all friends here, all right? The show is Ward Radio. Before we go, where can people find you? Start Kwaku, because we always start with Jacob because he's on the top on the left screen. Where can people find you and follow you if they want to tell you where you went wrong on Christopher Columbus? Kwaku, go.
Instagram and TikTok, it's @withkwaku. I'm coming down to LA pretty soon, so I'll be on more Ward Radio episodes because everyone's wondering where I went. I've just been really busy. So we will hash out some more controversial things. I'm thinking of making Marie Antoinette evil the next time I go down, and so we'll just see what I can do. I'm thinking of making her. I'm running out of people.
Well, wasn't she already evil, Marie Antoinette? Wasn't she the?
Oh yeah. You're
thinking of what, Marie Curie or what? Good luck on that one.
I'm thinking Marie Antoinette. Napoleon's cousin beheaded.
Oh, that one.
Why don't you go after Che Guevara and
Well, that's easy.
Karl Marx and Lenin and those guys?
Well, because their followers scare me.
Okay. And Jacob, where could people find you? You can
all find me, obviously, on YouTube, Thoughtful Faith. That's where I want you guys to go to. If you don't know Christopher, if you can't outline the third voyage, you shouldn't be talking about him, and you need to go watch that series that I have on my channel, or go to thoughtful-faith.com. Thoughtfulfaith.org is having problems right now. I got to figure out why that URL isn't working. Thoughtful-faith.com, and you can read my thing, Was Columbus a Monster? The stories you were not told.
Okay, if you guys want to buy a shirt, please make sure you check us out at wardradio.com. Also, there are 2 There are 2 War in Heaven veteran hats left on the website today before we have to order a new shipment. So make sure you guys check out the merch store to get a War in Heaven veteran hat on the merch store. Jacob and Kwaku, just hang out for 2 minutes as we got this outro here. I got some good news. Either way, as we say in our regular shows, it's been real and it's been fun, and it's been real fun. For this and more, please make sure you check us out at wardradio.com.
I built a rocket in my basement. I'm gonna fly it to the moon. This supersonic is amazing. You're gonna feel my sonic boom. I'm flying higher and I'm never coming down. Look at me now. Look at me now. Look at me. We brought the funk into